Joe and I actually met at the University of Oklahoma as freshmen. My roommate and I joined a sorority, and he and his roommate joined a fraternity, and of course they fixed each other up. And my big sister in the sorority fixed me up with Joe's roommate, and my roommate up with Joe, and we double dated. And then when we got back to the sorority house that night, I said, gosh, I thought Joe was so cute. And my roommate said, I really liked John. And I said, let's get this switched. And we did. The problem is I didn't tell Barbara some things I should have told her about John, but all is fair in love and war. We graduated from the University of Oklahoma with our bachelor's degrees, and he decided to take a year off and then apply to law school. He comes home one day and says, I'm going to sell cars instead of go to law school. And I said, what? He said, I'm going to sell cars. I love selling cars. I said, oh no, we're going to talk about this. Wait a minute.
As Joe tells it, he graduated from OU and he wanted to go into the Navy. And there was some difficulties physically. He couldn't get into the Navy, so he applied to law school. And I'm not sure what happened there, but he ended up going to work in the car business. One of his roommates, one of the fellow fraternity brothers, father owned a Dodge store, I believe, and Joe went to work there. And he told me that 3 weeks after he started there, he knew that's what he wanted to do for the rest of his life.
You're honest, you have integrity, you're quiet. This is not going to work. And he said, I'm going to sell cars. And I tried for 2 years to talk him out of it, and I couldn't do that. And well, as it turned out, he took all of those qualities and put it into his business in selling cars, and it's turned out to be wonderful. Joe had come to the point as being general manager with a dealership in Norman, Oklahoma, that he wanted to buy his own. So he looked in the computer and found Mr. Hermsmeyer here in Amarillo and knew that he was getting older, and came to Amarillo to meet with him and ask him if he would sell his dealership. And he said no, he wasn't interested. And then he found Mr. Brunken in Lubbock, and they were negotiating a possibility there when Mr. Hermsmeyer called Joe and said, Joe, you're a fine young man, and I don't have any children, and I need to retire. My wife has some health problems, and so I would like for you to come talk to me about buying my dealership. And that's how we end up in Amarillo.
When Joe first moved to town, he ended up being my next door neighbor. And we lived next door to each other for 5 or 6 years. I can't remember exactly when he moved off. Anyway, he and his wife were busy, raising their kids. We were just starting to have our family, and I've been able to get to know him over the last 4 or 5 years, more so than even when he was my neighbor. I see a man of integrity. When Joe says he's going to do something, you can take that to the bank.
I first met Joe when I worked at Corporate Systems, and Guyan Saunders was the founder of Corporate Systems, and I worked very closely with Guyan, and Joe and Guyan became the co-chairs for United Way in 2001, and that was really my first exposure to Joe. You put his time and his resources and his talents together, he really is a tremendous board asset. And that's been very evident in what he's done with the FCA board and how he basically, in my opinion, single-handedly took that board from an organization that was really struggling and completely reorganized and retooled that board and made it a very strong board and has really made it a very strong organization.
He's helped from the standpoint of not only just personal fundraising, what he gives, but also what he's able to help raise. He's added board members because of his relationship with them to our ministry. He's had a tremendous impact on Panhandle FCA.
He just has this quiet temperament, this satisfied way of going through life that says he's not reaching for something that he doesn't have.
His parents were always talking about helping others, doing for others. His father in particular, he has a tremendous respect for. He is gone now, but Joe always talks about his father and what he used to say about make sure you take care of your family, make sure that you take care of others around you, and do what you can to improve the community.
Just doing something just good enough isn't good enough for Joe, and he really has that quality aspect of him and an excellence aspect to where he wants to do it right.
He volunteers for things that he really feels passionate about. And it's very easy for him to say no. He only does those things that he can do and do really well, and that he does it from his heart, and he'll be the first one to tell you that it's God's work and that God has given him everything he has.
I think what he finds in FCA is the opportunity to do ministry in an area that's important to him, where we combine not only the spiritual component but the athletic component in reaching young men and women with the message of the gospel.
His temperament and his intensity is quietly powerful. He values in this business, of course, it's all about how customers are treated, and he keeps his finger on the pulse of how Street Toyota customers are treated. And he does that from afar. And you would almost think if you worked here, he didn't know, but he does.
One time, I had called Mike Good, the general manager of the Toyota dealership. Joe had been gone on a fishing trip for 3 days, and I needed to do something business-wise. And I said, Mike, I need for you to help me with this because, of course, Joe's out of town. And he said, Joe's out of town? I said, you didn't know that? His office is in that building, and you didn't know that? And he said, Laura, our job is to make sure that we can keep this place running the way he wants it run so that he can take off and go fishing when he wants to go fishing.
There are two people that I've met in Amarillo, Texas in the last 30 years here that I would like to be like when I grow up. One was Guy Saunders, and the other is Joe Street. Unfortunately, I'm older than Joe.
All the things that he does really are not about Joe. They are really about what he is trying to do for other people.
You know, if you take someone that I know Joe really respected a great deal, and I worked for him on 2 different occasions, Guy Saunders. If Guy is one who represents what a man of the year looks like, Joe Street certainly is cut from that same cloth.
The thing that impresses me the most about Joe, it's not just what he does, which is a tremendous amount across our community, but it's how he does it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 2013 Amarillo Globe News Man of the Year, Joe Street.